Hey everybody. Hope you're all well. I know it's crunch time for your projects and capstone projects, but we still have to get through the last couple weeks of this course. Just so you know, if you weren't here for the lecture and you're watching the video, you probably don't know I did drop assignment 5 because I don't think we're gonna have enough time to finish it. But we do have two more in-class things to do. One is today, that's why I'm recording this, and then there'll be number 5, which will be like a review almost for the final. The final is going to be similar to the midterm. You'll have a certain amount of time to do it, and yeah, you can do it at home or whatever you want to do. Today, I want to just talk briefly about React, um, and then the assignment 4 will be based um, React, so should be interesting. So you can follow along here if you want to, but I'm gonna just do what we usually do and start a demo. So basically, what is React, right? Like React, let's go to their website. And it's basically a JavaScript library for building user interfaces. And it's mainly used for building these things called single page applications or SPAs. And that basically means content is updated dynamically without reloading the whole page, right? So, SPAs were created to quote unquote solve problems with traditional websites. So, for example, if I go to CNN.com and I click on a link, the page has to reload, and you see that like flicker, right? Because they're going to a new page, the URL changes, and so on and so forth. Things like Google Maps, Twitter, Facebook, they call these single page applications because the page doesn't reload. It reloads the content within the page, so the user kind of gets a better experience. Now, this was popular, 10 years ago. It's still relatively popular, but it's changing a lot. And one of the downsides is search engine optimization (SEO). I just want to show you quickly. Actually, we'll still do this. Hold on one second. I guess we'll show an example in a minute. So, React was created as this front end library. There was no routes, there was no APIs involved with it, and there still isn't. And basically, a software engineer at Facebook created it about in 2010 or 11, and they created it because Facebook was growing so fast. The front end code was getting hard or difficult to manage. So every time something changed on the page, like a comment or a notification, you would have to use the DOM, document object model, to update the page, right? And you know that it can get pretty cumbersome, doing these kind of things. And if you don't know what we're talking about, here's a sample page. We'll just do hello, and I'll make a div main. I say world. So if I wanted to change what this said inside of the main div, it would look something like this, right? Document dot get element by ID, then main inner HTML equals whatever, right? My name. Pretty simple. We all know this. We know this is DOM manipulation document object model, but it started getting cumbersome at first. And before I should not continue on React, we should talk about jQuery. Hopefully, you've heard of jQuery before. And jQuery was like one of the king of JavaScript libraries in the 2010. And that's because this even is cumbersome, right? So document.getElement by ID, and there's tons of these different ones, get element by class, get by tag, name, all this kind of stuff. So someone invented jQuery where we could just actually get the element doing something like this, and it streamlines this whole process, right? That being said, it's still error prone to updating. You can imagine a very complicated web page with multiple divs in multiple areas. Getting the element is tough. So React, on the other hand, basically you describe what you want the UI to look like, and React handles the updates. Kind of a different mindset than this and these other web pages that we use, but it is kind of cool. jQuery helped make JavaScript development easier, but React came along and now They say it's more scalable solution. I mean, I don't use it as much, but I would assume it is better for complex UIs. So React is maintained by Meta or Facebook. It's open source, and they make they lead the changes on it effectively, but it is supported by a huge community. Netflix, Airbnb, Uber, Shopify, Discord. They all, Discord looks like Discord on your phone and on your computer and on the website because it's a single page application that is built in React. And I'm sure you've also heard of something called Angular, right? And Angular and React, they're not confused, but they're compared. And Angular was created by Google, and it's a full framework which includes routing, form validation, HTTP handling, dependency injection, and more stuff like out of the box. Whereas React is strictly for front end; it doesn't do any back end outside of the box. If you think of it like React is a Lego set where you kind of choose your own pieces, and Angular is the full Lego spaceship. And why aren't we doing Angular? Well, we just don't have enough time really to do it. But that being said, people love React, but they do want to also use it for the Lego spaceship. So Next.js was designed. And like as great as React is, it doesn't give you everything you need, right? It doesn't handle routing. It doesn't support server-side rendering or static generation by default. The SEO is pretty tricky by itself. So Next.js is a framework built on top of React, which is then built on top of regular JavaScript or even jQuery. And that's why we're using, when you say I'm going to build a React web page, usually you use Next.js, which is what we're going to use today. One last thing about React, it is a component-based library. This basically means it separates all of the components of your web page into small portions. I shouldn't use the definition in the name, but if you think about your header and your footer, and remember in ASP you would have partial classes and partial um, HTML files like CSS. That this is how React works. So each one of these would be a component, and then you can separate that so it's easier to update. And that was the whole point with Facebook is that programmers can individually work on a single component and they don't have to screw up the whole page effectively. Now the goal of this lecture or this lab is to number one, get an idea of what React is, and number two, get it working on your computer. So if you scroll down in these lecture notes, I'll save you a little bit of time. You can grab this npx create next app, which will be the template, and you can do the latest and call it my app. So you grab this and drop it into your um, your terminal in VS Code. Now, when you're doing this and you become more of an expert or you want to do certain things or use TypeScript instead of JavaScript, you can select certain options. Right now, we're not going to use TypeScript. We are going to use lint, and then everything else you can say no to. And if you've done everything right, you should get a folder called My App, which is here on the left. Just zoom in, and you can open it up if you got this far. I noticed that a few people in class, in fact, it wasn't just me, students solved this in one of the classes, but you may get an error if you run this npx create next app. There was a couple things. Number one, don't forget to run it in command prompt. It doesn't like PowerShell too often, too much, just like Node and Express. So if you do get this error that I've seen or you get red on the screen, there's a couple solutions. Number one, your node might not be up to date. So you want to do npm update -g, which should be a global update, and it may solve your error. Or if you keep getting them, you might want to do npm install -g. I can't do it right now, but those two things should fix the red error that you're getting, right? And then you should go through that whole process. Pretty simple. If you're still having problems, reach out to me. You need this to work for the lab and the assignment. I'll just clear this. Now to make this run, you just type you can go into the my app folder that was created, and then just type npm run dev. Note that we've done this a lot. npm or node run something or node npm run start. This isn't magic, right? Someone programmed this. So if you check out the package.json file and when you type npm whatever run, sorry, npm run whatever it is, dev build start. If you look in the scripts section, you can actually see it's just running this script. So it's saying npm run the script called dev, which is actually just a command next dev. Same for build, same for start. And you're like, well, why don't I just run this? Well, you can. You can just run this. And all you would type is npx next dev, and it is exactly the same as doing this. So why do we run these scripts? Npm run dev. Well, if you have more arguments, in this case we don't, but maybe there are some other arguments in here and you don't want to type them in all the time, then you just make it in the script. Anyhow, you should have known that from Express anyway. Moving on, if this works, click on localhost and you should get this black screen next.js, and this is our program so far. So again, once you have this going, open up the My App folder and then check out the pages, the pages folder. It's the most critical part of a React application, probably one of the most important parts. And in Next.js, the pages folder actually defines our routes automatically. So as soon as I create a new page, it becomes the route for that page. Unlike Express, where we actually had to set our own routes, right? So we can kind of show you an example of this. If I do a new file and I call it contact.js, now we have a contact.js route. Now we're going to get an error, obviously, but we have, because I haven't made anything in there, but it becomes a route, which is pretty cool. Pretty quick. All you have to do is do that. Notice also I didn't have to stop the server and rebuild it. It just automatically tries to load the page again for us. Now, why did we get a blank page? Well, we actually have to add some code into it, and I'll just copy and paste this in. This would be, what I use, contact. And I'll come back and explain this in a second, but if you check this out, I saved it and automatically there's our new page. It's pretty awesome. Things to note. This page, I call the function contact. I mean, technically it can be called whatever you want. It's going to run the first one, but I keep it the same as the route, as the file name. And second, you'll notice more so in the index, but check this out. This return is returning HTML, and it's not returning a string like this, which is a little weird when you think about how we're doing it in Express before, right? Because it was actually returning a string. This is returning HTML and there's no quotes around it. Why is that? Well, if you remember when we used Node and Express, when we wanted to make or simplify the process of sending out web pages or HTML, we would use something like a template engine, handlebars, EJS, I think we used in class. And then, the page would get rendered and then send it out. This is kind of a similar process, except for we're using something called JSX. And JSX allows you to put HTML and JavaScript together, and you don't have to quote it or turn it into a string. So it's like you write HTML like code. When I use quote, I know you can't see me, but I use quotations. It's HTML like code, but it's actually in a JavaScript file. So JSX reads this and dynamically changes variables inside of there, which we can embed, put functions in there, and React takes the framework takes care of the rest of it. So that's why I can actually put HTML in here as opposed to um, just a string. So I can even do something like this: take the entire index file, drop it into my contact, and just do return. And we need to just put it in brackets just to make sure it's all together. Actually, hold on. Let's make this simpler because I left this script code in here. In fact, in React, I don't even need to. I don't need to put the HTML head or the body, and we'll get back to why that is. But we'll do this way. So if I just want to have those elements, we do this. And so you do this, and then oops, like this. Not bad. Just so you know, in JSX, you have to have a wrapping container, so I'd actually have to wrap a div around this. It would look like that. So now I save it. You can see hello world. Pretty simple. If I kind of gloss over this, so this is our entire index.html. If we wanted to modify this head in our contact page, we'd have to do a few other tricks. But if you wanted to modify it in the actual template, we'd go into index and just scroll down to home, and then you can see here it is right here, right? Because you got to remember these are quote unquote single page apps, right? So our code is actually loading inside of this template. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. It should just get you started. Again, we take care of everything in here. Also, for APIs, similar situation. There's an API folder, and you just make a route, and you can send back whatever you want. So in here, we could actually connect to Postgres or Mongo, and then convert to a JSON object, and then output it. That's all this is doing. If you just notice, this is a JSON object, like so. Right, pretty simple. So your job: go over to content, go to evaluations, go to lab 4. It's right here. Due on Monday, and it basically says make this app. Here's some instructions, but it does ask you to make a component, which I have not shown you how to do yet. Or sorry, I'll rephrase, which I'm not going to show you how to do. I want you to make the component. I want you to not use ChatGPT. It would be really easy to say, how do I make a component in React or whatever? Just use the standard Google search, Stack Overflow, and learn how that component thing works. Because you're going to have to make a new folder and you're going to have to make a new file. And I just want you to understand how these component things are working. You're doing yourself a disfavor if you don't do it manually. So don't use ChatGPT if you can. It's not worth it. You're not going to learn anything. All right, that's it. Take a look at this. I will be releasing the last assignment today, so keep an eye out for that. It won't be due for a week or so, and then we'll move on from there. Have a great day, weekend.